Thanks for joining me. I've got another study in the series, Israel, the Church and the Kingdom of God. We're up to study 34, and we're looking at the time just before Jesus comes. So Jesus has got to judge the church first, and then he's going to judge Babylon. That's the period we're up to. And I've called this the mother of harlots, and you'll see why. I'm talking about the whore of Babylon. Definition of whore: to compromise one's principle for personal gain. It can be used in the physical, a prostitute is a whore, but it can be used politically or religiously. God said to Israel, you've prayed the whore, you've had other lovers. Let's read Revelation 17, verse 1 to 3, because this is what I'm basing the study on. And there came one of the seven angels. This is John. The angel came to John, which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth are committed fornication. So it's a spiritual fornication. The kings of the earth have made a political alliance for commerce and money, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So the whole world is seduced by this whore. So he carried me away in the spirit unto the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit on a scarlet-coloured beast. So the picture, he sees a woman sat on a scarlet-coloured beast, full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, we'll look at that. But Revelation is full of details about the last days and beyond. The problem is we can only understand it by revelation. You can't work it out naturally. You need revelation from God. It's the book of Revelation. And study in church doctrines and prejudice always get in the way of revelation. That's why we have so many debates, so many denominations, so many controversies about the last days, pre-trib and post-trib and mid-trib, and everyone's arguing about the order of things in the last days, but you need revelation. And I know ministers who won't preach on revelation. They say, it's too controversial. I never preach on revelation. For me, that's an admission that they don't understand it. If they understood it, why wouldn't they preach on it? It says, blessed is they who hear and understand the book at the end of Revelation. Blessed is who reads and understands. So it's a failure on ministers if they don't have revelation. But I understand it. Without revelation, you're lost. Well, there's much in Revelation that's still a mystery to me. I'm not claiming I've got perfect understanding, and I'm waiting for revelation on it. But I'm more interested in not the details, but the overall plan of God, because this series is about love, romance and family life, the plan of God. So I'm not so interested in the nitty-gritty details, but the overall plan of God. So symbols in the Bible. This is a symbol of a woman who sat on a horse. We're not talking about the beast she sits on. That's the next study. The woman rides the beast. We're looking at the woman, the whore. And it's obviously symbolic. And symbols in the Bible have 2 definitions. There's the good and the bad, the black and the white. For some examples, a lion in the Bible, you could say, well, that's the devil. He goes around like a roaring lion. But the lion is also Jesus, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So A lion is good symbol and a bad one. What about the communion? The disciples had the cup of blessing, but Judas took the cup of devils. Same cup. Jesus dipped the sop in the same wine that the disciples took, and he gave it to Judas. And as soon as he took it, the devil entered him. So he took the cup of devils, but the disciples took the cup of blessing. So everything is dual. What about the Bible? It's a wonderful book. No, it's a killer. The dead letter kills. The spirit on the book gives life, but the dead letter kills. So the Bible has two symbols. It either takes Jesus out of you or puts Jesus in you. What about fire? Fire could be the Holy Ghost, can't it? It could be the lake of fire. One's blessing, one's judgment. Can you see that symbols in the Bible can mean two things, good or bad, and we need to realise that. The whore is obviously a bad woman. The bride of Christ is a good woman. Well, Peter said judgment must begin at the house of God before Jesus returns. 1 Peter 4:17. So God's going to judge Babylon, but before he needs to judge his church. God can't judge the world until he's judged the church. It's obvious. I can't judge the children next door unless I deal with my own children. And Peter says this, he's talking about the last days. For the time is come that judgment must begin at the house of God. And if it begin at us, what shall the end be of them that obey not the gospel of God? So judgment begins at the house of God. It's interesting. The next chapter, 1 Peter 5:13, Peter says this. He's finishing his letter. The church that is at Babylon, elected together with you, saluteth you, and so doth Marcus my son. The church that is at Babylon. There's no record of Peter ever going to Babylon. Where did Peter go to Babylon to preach? He was the apostle to the Jews in Jerusalem. So I think he's spiritual Babylon. Go back to the last slide, Jay. The church that is at Babylon. I think that Peter knew the church was already in Babylon, because in 2 Peter 2 he says, there was false prophets in the Old Testament, and there shall be false prophets among you. He knew the false prophets were already in the church, and we've got the letters to Revelation, the 7 letters to the churches that say you've got the doctrine of Balaam, you've got the doctrine of Jezebel, you've got the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, you've left your first love. 40 years after the Acts of the Apostles, or the day of Pentecost, the church were in Babylon, the backslid, and you always revert back to religion. God wants a relationship. He doesn't want a religion. He wants a personal relation with individuals. He doesn't have a relationship with the church. It's a personal revelation. I have a personal salvation, a personal relationship with God, not a corporate one. And so God wants a relationship, not religion, but we revert back into religion, to church doctrines and dogma and traditions of the elders. Well, God uses women through the Bible to symbolise true or false worship. Israel were God's wife. When she worshipped other gods, he said, you've committed adultery. So he uses marital terms, sexual terms. He said to Israel, you've played the whore, you're my wife, and you've had other lovers. And let me bring you a couple of scriptures where God says these things, that Israel had committed whoredom with false gods. Jeremiah 3, verse 8 and 9. And I saw, when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery, so that Israel, a nation, can't commit physical adultery. You've got to be an individual to commit adultery. So this is an adulterous relationship with other gods. The nation of Israel served Moloch in the wilderness. I put her away and give her a bill of divorce. So God divorced Israel for the whoredoms. Can you see how he uses marital sexual terms? Because that's relationship with a man and a woman. You get married, you produce children, you can divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah feared not, but went and played the harlot also. And it came to pass through the lightness of her whoredoms that she defiled the land and committed adultery with stones and with stocks. Not physical adultery, but spiritual. They bowed down to idols, to stones and stocks and wooden effigies. Well, that's Israel, the wife of God, but the bride of Christ also is a woman. 2 Corinthians 11:2. This is the pure woman, not the whore. Paul says to the church, "For I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." So the bride of Christ is a pure virgin. Babylon is the whore, the filthy whore. The Bible also talks about two cities. Cities can be good or bad. And New Jerusalem, that's the bride of Christ. So the woman is a city. The bride of Christ is the virgin, but it's also a city. Let's read it, Revelation 21:2. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. So New Jerusalem comes down as a bride, so it's the bride of Christ. So the woman, the symbol of a woman and the symbol of a city are the same, for good and bad. So that's the good. The virgin bride of Christ is New Jerusalem. But the whore is Babylon, a city Babylon. Revelation 17:5. This is the woman described. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. From the dispersion of Israel and Judah, Judah actually, to Babylon, in Nebuchadnezzar's time and Daniel's time, God's people have remained in Babylon, and only a remnant came back to Judah, but they carried the doctrines of Babylon. The Jews today use the Babylonian Talmud, that's the highest authority, over the Torah, the law of Moses. And it's only a remnant that didn't bow the knee in Babylon. Isaiah 14:4. This is a prophecy of the king of Babylon. Thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say, How hath the oppressor ceased, the golden city ceased. So Babylon is the woman. When God restores Israel, they'll take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. Well, let's look at this woman, the description of the woman. It gives us much insight to the woman who's riding the beast. We'll look at that in the next study. Revelation 17:3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-coloured beast, having the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Well, one question we need to ask, and we'll cover it more next study, who's in control? The woman's riding a beast, so the woman's steering the beast, but the woman has no power. The beast has all the power. It can take the woman wherever the woman wants, but if the beast stops, it's like driving a motor car. You're steering the motor car, but you've got no power. If you run out of petrol, you can't steer anywhere. So the question to ask, is the woman controlling the beast, or is the beast taking the woman for a ride? Because they've got to work together. The beast, the power without being steered is useless. And the woman, the steering with no power is useless. So you need it's an alliance between the woman and the beast. She's riding the beast. They're connected. We'll look at it later, but the 10 kings destroy the beast. It's not the beast who destroys the woman, but the beast gives power to 10 kings and they destroy the beast. We'll look at that because this is the myth of Europa. We'll look at it in depth in a minute. Europe's named after Europa. Charlemagne named it Europe. He was Christendom before then, the Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, Christendom they called it. And the myth of Europa, if you don't know the Greek myth, Zeus, a demigod, came down to earth and he saw this beautiful woman. He came down in the form of a bull. This is the myth. Zeus, the Greek god, came down as a bull and he saw this beautiful woman and he put her on his back and he rode into the sea and raped her. And then I think Apollos was the result of the union. But the woman riding the beast. So that's the myth of Europa. So it's interesting. We're going to look at subsequent studies. If Charlemagne named Europe after this myth, and so Europe is the woman, so who's going to rape her? Who's going to rape Europe? We'll look at that. But the woman riding a beast is all over the world. I used to go to Brussels a lot, and outside the headquarters there's a statue of a woman riding a beast. The Council of Europe, there's another in front of the Parliament buildings in Strasbourg. That's a woman on a beast. See the naked woman riding a bull. Why would they have a statue all over Europe? Different sculptures. There's one in Copenhagen, one in Moscow. That's the one in Brussels. I think there's a woman. You can't see it, but there's a bull and a woman on top of it. And it's used on postage stamps and coins. There's another woman riding a beast, a naked woman riding a bull. Why would they put statues all over? That's a German. That's a stamp, European stamp, second European Parliament. There's a woman riding a beast. There's a coin, that's a Greek coin with a woman riding a beast. So it's all over Europe. So Europe's going to get raped, isn't it? Why would they call it? They're telling you predictive programming. Let's read about this woman because it's very descriptive. Revelation 17:4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. That's interesting, isn't it? Beautiful woman. On first description, you'd think it was the bride of Christ. The woman was arrayed in purple, scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, a golden cup in her hand. If you didn't know what was in the cup, you'd think this was a beautiful woman. That's the bride. That's the regal colours of the tabernacle. Gold, scarlet, and blue, and red, and fine twined linen. That's the bride of Christ, surely. That's what John thought. He didn't know what was in the cup. He thought it was the bride of Christ, a beautiful woman. That's New Jerusalem. The streets are paved with gold. The foundations are precious stones. The gates are pearls. So it's symbolic of the bride of Christ. That's the problem. The counterfeit and the real look the same. This Bible looks the same. It can kill people or give them life. The communion wine looks the same, but it can be the cup of devils or the cup of life. Can you see that the symbol is the same? Because John wouldn't know what was in the cup. If a lady holds a cup up, it's a beautiful lady, and it's the same as the bride of Christ. The whore doesn't look like as I imagine a whore. When I think of a prostitute, I think of a girl stood on the street corners, maybe shooting heroin, and just open to any dirty old man who wants to pay for sex with her. But this is a high-class courtesan. She's decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. She's dressed in finery. This is a high-class courtesan. This is the type of woman that kings and billionaires go with. She would have a penthouse. She would have a Porsche. She would have designer clothes. She would talk eloquently. She wouldn't talk with an accent. She'd have a billionaire or a king wouldn't go with a woman who talked common. So it's very deceptive. She has the appearance of a lady, a queen, but she's got the heart of a whore. This whore sees herself as a lady, as a queen. And Revelation 18:7 tells what she thinks about herself, how much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her, for she said in her heart, this is the heart of a whore, I sit a queen and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. I'm all right. This woman feels she's a lady, a queen. She doesn't know she's got the heart of a whore. And at John's first glance, he saw the bride of Christ, and then he saw what was in a cup. And Revelation 17:5 describes the thinking on the forehead, and upon her forehead there's a name written, Babylon, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abomination of the earth. Mother of harlots. It shows what's in her mind. And John wondered in admiration, it says, how can this beautiful woman be a whore? She looks beautiful. She looks like the bride of Christ. It's very deceptive. An angel told John he shouldn't be surprised. And we shouldn't be surprised. The early church could prostitute itself. Money comes into prostitution. You sell yourself for immoral purposes. Ananias and Sapphira, as soon as the day of Pentecost has happened, a few days later or a few months later, Ananias and Sapphira were struck dead by God because of covetousness. Money came in so easily, and false doctrines came in, false prophets came in, and people prostituted themselves, and the bride of Christ became a whore. It's happened after every revival. It's not what I think, it's history. Israel, that God saved them, and they prostituted themselves. They played the harlot with other religions, and then God judged them, and then they repented, and God restored them again, and then they backslid. And the church, why have we needed revivals since the day of Pentecost? Why do you need revivals? Because the church is backslidden. You don't need a revival if you're in the blessing. You need a revival. You need a revival when you're dead. You need to be revived. The world can't have a revival only because they've never been alive. The church, when it becomes dead, can be revived. The world can't backslide, can they, to be revived, because they're dead already. They're under judgment already. This is the mystery Babylon that the devil offered to Eve. It's the occult religion that's come all the way from ancient Babylon, from Nimrod, to all the corruption of the present day religions. including Christianity. Well, if a woman's not a virgin, by default, she's the whore. So if you're not the bride of Christ, you're part of the whore, you're part of Babylon. The Roman Empire has been the centre of Christendom, but the original Roman Empire covered far more than we know as Europe. You know, we call Europe the revived Roman Empire. But in the early days, the Roman Empire covered Armenia and Arabia. And Islam came out of Arabia, didn't it? Modern Iraq and Turkey would also be part of it. These Muslim countries were also part of the original Roman Empire. We've revived Europe, but we haven't included the Muslim countries. Turkey was wanting to join the EU. For years, it's not part of it yet, but they want to join the EU. It was the first Muslim country to do so. And I don't think it'll be the last. Martin Luther thought that the East and Western empires are the two legs of the statue of Rome. We'll look at the statue in subsequent studies that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dream. And he thinks Islam and Catholicism, maybe one's spiritual and one's physical. Well, that's what Martin Luther thinks. I'm just throwing that out. I'm not saying I agree with that. But it's not by chance that Islam's grown to be a world force, same as a revival of the Roman Empire. I'll look at it. I've got a study in 2 weeks called The Crescent Moon, looking at Islam. But I'll finish now because the next study is The Woman Rides the Beast, so I'm going to look at it in more detail. But I want to finish with this. The woman was sat on the waters, Revelation 7:15. And the angel explains to John what the waters were that the woman sat upon. And he said unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples, multitudes, and nations, and tongues. That covers the whole world. That's what God said to Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel 2. He said, you're a king of kings, Nebuchadnezzar. You're the Antichrist. And wherever people dwell, where people are multitude and tongues and nations, you've got control over them. God gave Nebuchadnezzar the kingdom, the power and the glory and the strength. He handed God's people over to Babylon. And we've been under Babylon ever since. The woman sits upon the waters, and the waters are the peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. You know, I believe Babylon has moved physically, not physically, but spiritually. It moved to Constantinople, and it's ended up in Rome. And that's Babylon today. Vatican City is the only state in the world to have diplomatic relationships with every other nation. The Jesuits under the Vatican run all the kings of the world. We'll see later that this whore rules all the nations of the world, all the kings. And powerful nations such as the USA and Britain use a spy network for information because, you know, Britain hasn't got diplomatic relations with every nation. The USA haven't. No nation has diplomatic relationships with every nation because they fall out, withdraw the diplomats. But the Vatican City is the only nation state that has diplomatic relationships with every other country in the world because they control them all. So I'll finish there because it's only part of the study. Recommended reading: Babylon in Europe by David Hathaway. That's interesting. He also did a film, The Rape of Europe, and A Woman Rides the Beast by David Hunt. Well, I'll finish there because we're only part way through. The next study is The Woman Rides the Beast. So tune in for the next study. Have a wonderful week. God bless you.